Mark Morton is not just a guitarist. He is an invisible force, an architect of sound who can turn metal into emotion, noise into structure, chaos into power. His fingers don't simply play music, they command the pulse of a seismic wave known as Lamb of God. Every riff is like a blade of steel, cold, precise, unforgiving. He doesn't need theatrics to shake a stage. His music does that on its own. One moment he can drown tens of thousands of people in a storm of sound. The next, pull them into a silence heavy as stone pressing on the chest. From small rehearsal rooms in Virginia to the largest metal stages on the planet, Morton did not rise as a passing trend. He became a pillar, a name carved deep into the structure of modern metal. Albums that shaped a generation, tours that stretched across continents. A career built on iron discipline and undeniable talent. At the peak, he seemed unshakable, solid as the very framework of the music he helped create. But the lights never tell the whole story. Behind the intensity, behind walls of speakers that make the ground tremble, stands a man who has been pushed to the edge of exhaustion. Success did not erase pain. Music did not prevent loss. And there were battles Morton had to walk into with no applause waiting at the end. The world sees a metal icon. Behind the curtain is the journey of a man who had to learn how to survive the darkness within himself. Stage lights, speaker stacks that shake the ground, guitar riffs like metal striking metal, all of that came much later. Before becoming the man behind a sound capable of crushing a listener's chest, Mark Morton was just a boy born in 1972 in Williamsburg, Virginia. No cinematic tragedy. No childhood shattered by poverty or violence. His life began in a relatively stable American middle-class environment where the days passed so quietly that no one could have imagined one of modern metal's most ferocious sound architects would emerge from it. That very normalcy is the crucial detail. Morton didn't turn to music to escape darkness. He was drawn to it for something entirely different: the fascination of structure. While many teenagers picked up the guitar as a symbol of rebellion, Morton approached it like a system to be understood. And he was absorbed by how rhythm functioned, how a sequence of notes could alter the entire atmosphere of a room. To him, the guitar wasn't just emotion, it was mechanism, motion, something that could be taken apart and reassembled. He studied at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, an environment that would later, almost by accident, become the intersection point of the people who formed the precursor to Lamb of God. Music didn't arrive in a burst of rebellion, but through slow accumulation. Playing, experimenting, analyzing, building. There was no dark childhood myth to tell, no escape from hell narrative. Only a paradox taking shape, a person raised in stability, drawn toward music that sounded like a storm. And that quiet foundation later became the solid core that kept him from breaking when life truly began to tremble. The calm of those early years did not last forever. When Morton arrived in Richmond in the mid-1990s, the college city wasn't loud like Los Angeles or New York. But in damp basements and cramped rehearsal rooms, a raw sound was forming. In 1994, a group of very young musicians came together, and the name Burn the Priest appeared. Not as a brand, but as an instinctive declaration. Morton stood there with his guitar, not chasing lights, only searching for ways to make the sound heavier, tighter, more precise. The music they created had no large venues, no charts, only sweat, broken strings, buzzing amps, and nights when the sound slammed into concrete walls and came back like a punch. Morton didn't play to impress, and he dissected each riff, cut away excess, pushed rhythms until they were taut as steel wire. There, The DNA that would later define Lamb of God already existed. Riffs heavy as steel plates, fractured grooves that forced the listener's body to react, a ritualistic sense in the way passages repeated like a vortex. The intensity didn't come from chaos, but from structure pulled tight. The first recordings, the demos, the small-scale split releases were steps taken feeling through the dark. No glory, only patience and pressure placed on themselves. Morton grew increasingly obsessed with precision. Rehearsals could stretch to exhaustion over a transition that wasn't sharp enough. By 1999, the Burn the Priest album emerged. Not a commercial explosion, but the first map of the road ahead. In it, Morton's guitar already carried the full imprint of a sound architect in formation, a man who would turn those cramped rehearsal rooms into the foundation of music, powerful enough to shake the world's biggest stages. The debut album closed not with an explosion, but with the feeling of a machine whose frame had just been assembled. Then the name changed. Burn the Priest slipped back like old skin, and then Lamb of God emerged, sharper, more direct. In 2000, New American Gospel stepped out of dark rooms and began touching a broader metal map. The sound was still raw, still carried the friction of metal grinding against metal, but the structure was clearer. Morton was no longer just a guitarist. He became the one building the skeleton of each song. Riffs didn't merely open or close sections. They controlled the motion of the entire track, forcing rhythm to follow the trajectory he laid down. Long van rides between cities and small stages, where lights couldn't hide the tangle of cables, created a different kind of pressure. How to maintain precision when the body was exhausted, when the onstage sound was never the same 2 nights in a row. Morton tightened everything further. His riffs gained fractured layers, sudden stops that threw audiences off balance before pulling them back with grooves heavy as falling stone. By As the Palaces Burn in 2003, the blade of sound had been sharpened. The music was faster, heavier, yet more disciplined. Guitars interlocked like gears, and Morton's solos didn't chase the spotlight. They slipped into songs like compressed emotional currents, flaring only when needed before disappearing, leaving aftershock. His style stood clear, polyrhythmic but not chaotic, technical without display, and always holding a deep undercurrent that moved the body before the mind understood what was happening. The gears had meshed, and the machine began running at a speed even its operators could hardly predict. In 2004, Ashes of the Wake arrived like a deep cut across the surface of contemporary metal. The sound wasn't just heavy, it had direction, purpose, a sense that every drum, hit, and riff sat exactly where it should to create maximum force. Morton had fully stepped into the architect's role. Guitar structures moved like a mechanical system, yet underneath remained a groove pulling the listener forward. The album opened larger doors, placing Lamb of God at the center of modern metal's current, where their name was spoken alongside the pillars of the generation. The following year, Philadelphia appeared as a live slice from nights growing hotter by the day. Not a studio capture, but living energy seized amid shaking speakers and sweat on the stage floor. Vans blurred into one long stretch of time, sleep became a luxury, bodies pushed to the limit and still forced onward. Music was no longer something performed. It functioned like a living organism breathing with the crowd. Amid near chaos, Morton kept his guitar at its familiar cold precision, each beat placed like the tick of a clock. That contrast began changing the atmosphere within the band. Pressure no longer came only from volume or speed, but from having to recreate that peak night after night, without margin for drift. By 2006, with Sacrament, the scale had expanded significantly. Larger stages, massive sound systems, and festivals like Ozfest, placing them in the mainstream metal flow. Signing with a major label like Epic didn't just open doors, it brought expectations on a different scale. The music retained Morton's tight structures, polyrhythmic riffs layered with drums and bass into a synchronized system. Groove never sacrificed for technique. Each song still carried a clear emotional pull, like an undercurrent beneath the metal. The pressure was no longer about being noticed, but about staying sharp, while all eyes were already on them. In 2009, Wrath arrived while the machinery had never slowed. The music kept its intensity, the structures remained tight, yet the relentless touring life began leaving traces of fatigue in how everything operated. The machine hadn't stopped, only lost some smoothness. Morton continued building sound with his familiar precision, locking riffs together like gears, while outside, the speed of the career kept increasing. Body and mind had to learn to bear the weight of years in constant motion, where each new album was not only a musical step forward, but also a test of endurance for the man behind the guitar. The pace did not slow. Van rides blurred into chains of day and night without borders. One stage would go dark, and another city would already be appearing through windows, fogged with alcohol and exhaustion. Success came fast, and the lifestyle followed that rhythm. Adults living on schedules like children who had never learned to stop, laughter too loud, nights stretching until the body could no longer tell the difference between fatigue and adrenaline. The pressure wasn't in one song, but in having to reproduce that intensity hundreds of times, amid noise, expectations, and relationships pulled tight as guitar strings. One night in Glasgow, after the stage lights went down, the energy didn't disappear. It condensed inside the narrow space of a tour bus, where exhaustion, alcohol, and unspoken words built like static. The tension erupted into a clash between Mark Morton and Randy Blythe. A raw moment, with no stage lights to soften it. The explosion came and faded, but the real point lay in what followed. They still had to step onto the next stage, strings retuned, drums counting in, bodies operating as if nothing had happened. The machine does not stop just because the people inside it have collided. In those years, maturity didn't arrive as a declaration, but as a repeated choice, giving each other space to fail, then opening the door to return to the circle. Morton kept writing with the same obsession for structure, and as if placing notes correctly could keep everything from slipping off orbit. By 2012, Resolution emerged under stacked pressure, carrying familiar weight, but also proof the band still stood, still played, still searched for balance when many believed the earlier impact was enough to shatter everything. The machine kept running, drums still relentless, yet deep inside the invisible framework holding it together, a crack had quietly formed beyond the reach of stage lights. In 2009, between flights and a packed schedule, while Morton's guitar still had to hit near mechanical precision every night, his private life collapsed into a darkness that stage language cannot name. His newborn daughter, Madeline Grace Morton, passed away just one day after entering the world due to infection. The event made no loud noise, offered no dramatic moment for an audience to recognize. It arrived like an abrupt silence in a song at full climax, where every sound suddenly feels meaningless. In a world measured by intensity and crowd response, this grief existed outside all scales. And the industry's machinery does not understand the idea of stopping so someone can breathe. About 6 weeks later, Morton stood under cold, white stage lights, strings stretched across his shoulder, hands moving on muscle memory forged through thousands of hours. The body did its job, while the mind remained trapped where no applause could reach. The cruelty lay not in human will, but in the system's indifferent rhythm. The show must go on, the bus must roll, the schedule must hold. Music, once a tool for directing emotion, became the only vessel large enough to contain pain that could not be spoken. That idea seeped into how he wrote. When Embers appeared later, it did not follow the structure of direct storytelling. No explicit details, no clearly laid-out narrative. Instead, a dense atmosphere, spaces between notes where vibrations linger a little longer, where rhythm seems to hesitate before continuing. Morton did not turn loss into a slogan. He let it exist as a low heat beneath the metal, something felt more than heard. Listeners might not know the details, but they can sense something slowly burning under the surface. In the years after, touring schedules stretched on, performance intensity never truly dropped, professional discipline keeping the machine smooth from the outside. Inside, grief had not settled. Fatigue accumulated with every trip, every sleepless night, and every time he stepped before thousands while his inner world tightened inward. Unhealthy coping methods slipped quietly into the gaps, not loud, not declared, just slowly taking space. The guitar tone remained sharp, riffs still locked like gears, but behind that precision stood a man moving closer to his own edge, unseen by a single ticket in the crowd. Pressure did not vanish after years of compression. It simply changed form. Instead of continuing to force every emotion into the same familiar metal framework, Mark Morton began opening another space, one where the guitar could carry more shades beyond sheer intensity. The idea of a project bearing his own name did not arise as a rebellion, but as an inner need that had been building for a long time. From 2017 onward, his collaboration with Chester Bennington was mentioned as a sign that Morton was seeking a different emotional language, where heaviness came not only from sound, but from what someone was trying to express. By late 2018, when the name Anesthetic began to appear, it did not feel like a marginal side project, but like a door finally opened after years of being locked. In early 2019, the album was released via Spine Farm. And from the very first moments, it was clear that Morton still retained the structural framework that had defined his reputation. Precise riffs, rhythms with a clear pull, transitions calculated like links in a system. But unlike Lamb of God, the music here does not compress everything into one dense block. There is more space between the guitar layers, the breathing of the songs left exposed, as if Morton is allowing listeners to step between the notes rather than simply be swept away by them. The Truth Is Dead appears as a clear bridge to his previous world. The presence of Randy Blythe and Alyssa White-Glues preserves metallic intensity, but places it in a context where the song structure is more flexible, not locked into familiar formulas. It feels like a bridge. One end, still connected to the collective machine forged over years, the other opening into a sonic space where Morton allows more room for personal emotion. Cross-off moves in another direction. The foundation riff carries Morton's signature, heavy, marked by characteristic rhythmic breaks, yet it does not overpower the vocal. Bennington's voice enters the song like an emotional conduit, not displaying technique, but focusing on inner weight. The two energy streams, guitar and voice, do not compete, and they spiral toward the same tension point where pain and the will to endure meet. The imagery accompanying the track, the way the song was brought into the light, the lineup associated with its performance, all carry the sense that this was not a product built to attract attention, but a moment opened because it needed to be opened. The solo current did not close after Anesthetic. In 2020, the EP Ether appeared as a deliberate step forward, not loud, but clear in direction. Here, Morton continues to keep his tightly structured skeleton, but the sound layers open up, allowing melody and the space between notes to linger longer. The weight remains, only no longer compressed in a way that forces the listener against a wall of sound. The songs carry darker, more contemplative shades, showing that he is concerned with the inner resonance of music, not just its outward impact. This is not an abrupt turn, but a controlled expansion, where the guitar still holds the central role but is placed within a broader emotional context. At the same time, Lamb of God released the album Lamb of God, continuing to maintain their position on major stages and their familiar performance pace. The songs there still carry the collective intensity forged over many years, driving drums, sharp riffs, tightly wound structures. The machine continues to operate, still demanding the precision Morton has been tied to since the early days. The difference lies in the fact that alongside it, another space now exists, where he allows the guitar to reflect deeper emotional layers, quieter zones that previously had little place in his music. Between these two currents, Morton does not stand apart from either side. He moves back and forth, bringing the experience of collective intensity into his personal project, and in return carrying the expanded emotional depth of his solo path back into the band's sound. The guitar is no longer only a tool for impact, but gradually becomes a means through which he processes things that once existed only in silence, inner territories that cannot be resolved by speed or volume alone. That expansion did not slow the collective machine. If anything, it placed Lamb of God in historical spaces that only a small number of metal bands ever reach. When stepping onto the farewell tour dates of Slayer, the atmosphere on stage carried a different kind of weight from ordinary tours. It was not merely a run of shows, but the moment a generation closed its circle. Morton stood in that current not as a spectator, but as part of the structure continuing the legacy. The intensity was still there, the guitar tone still razor-sharp, yet behind every beat was the sense of passing through a time marker that heavy music rarely gets to witness. Earlier large stages left their own marks as well. Tours with Metallica, where scale and production precision demanded every note stand firm. Ozfest, where multiple metal currents intersected in one space. The first steps into Europe, when a sound born in Virginia echoed through unfamiliar cities. Major label agreements opened new operational scope, placing their music into wider distribution systems, but also adding pressure for consistency and quality. What Morton focuses on is not a single night, nor one especially loud cheer. The weight lies in the fact that the music continues to exist year after year through personal upheavals, internal collisions, and industry shifts. While many bands flare up and fade out, Lamb of God has kept its shape, continuing to write, to play, to step on stage with the same level of commitment. For Morton, pride does not live in the brightest flash of light, but in the fact that the light does not go out after the crowd leaves the stadium. Amid massive stages and constantly moving crowds, there is a part of life Mark Morton has always kept out of the spotlight's reach. He does not put his family on magazine covers, nor turn his private life into a narrative packaged with the music. That discretion is not due to a lack of story, but because for him, and close relationships do not belong in the same space as guitars and loudspeakers. The media has almost no reliable public record confirming his wife's name, wedding dates, or details about his children, and that informational gap itself reveals a clear trait. The boundary between stage and family is held as tightly as he locks the structure of a riff. Within that private space, joy and loss occur without applause. In 2009, while his career intensity remained high, his newborn daughter Madeline Grace Morton passed away just one day after birth due to infection. This grief did not appear on tour posters, nor could it be resolved through volume. It existed in a hospital room, in silent moments where music could not intrude. Family became the place where he faced loss directly, with no role to play, no metal shell for protection. The performance cycle did not slow in proportion to that shock. Schedules kept pushing forward, forcing him back onto stage, while body and mind had not yet processed what had happened. The distance between external noise and inner emptiness grew wider, creating a prolonged, quiet tension. From that experience, another direction slowly formed in how he viewed life and music, seeking clarity rather than numbness, seeking peace rather than mere endurance, so the guitar would not only be a tool for impact, but also a means of balance amid the deepest emotional terrains. The guitar, once armor, once a tool for endurance, gradually became a door that had to be opened. After long years of keeping many things inside, Mark Morton stepped into another form of expression: writing. On June 25, 2024, is the memoir, Desolation. A heavy metal memoir was released not as a promotional move, but as a journey that had to be taken. Putting memory onto the page carried more the tone of therapy than ordinary storytelling. The years on stage, the clashes, the endless van rides were revisited through the lens of someone who had traveled far enough to no longer tell the story only through noise. Within the structure of the book, the chapter concerning the death of his newborn daughter stands in a place entirely different from the rest, because it is not a memory that can be arranged in simple chronological order. It exists like a cut that all other milestones must move around. Translating pain into written language opened a continuation within music. In 2025, the solo album Without the Pain appeared like a self-telling title. The sound does not abandon weight, but the way it is carried has changed. The guitar no longer operates as a weapon to push everything away, but as a voice that has learned to move through hurt rather than simply fight it. The structures remain precise, yet are no longer forced into a single form. The spaces between notes hold more meaning, as if the music now allows both what has been lost and what remains to exist within the same space. Looking back at the entire journey, what remains is not only a list of albums or stages crossed, but the imprint Mark Morton's sound has left on the structure of modern metal. The way he builds riffs, not from spontaneous chaos, but from tight structure, the rhythm with pulling force, and fractures that make the listener's body react, helped shape a musical language many later bands continue to explore. In the sound of Lamb of God, the guitar is not merely a backdrop or a tool for technical display. It becomes the framework that drives the entire song, where groove and rhythmic complexity exist together without canceling each other out. His influence does not lie in long solos or moments that seize all the light, but in how he places the guitar exactly where the song can breathe and move. Many younger musicians learn from that not just how to play fast or heavy, but how to control structure, how to let each riff serve a clear function within the whole. Alongside his purely musical impact, Morton's personal journey, from stage intensity through loss to finding balance and allowing vulnerability to exist within his playing, opens another image of a metal artist, fierce, yet not denying inner depth. That legacy was not built in one explosive moment, but through endurance across years, through industry shifts, through times when simply continuing to exist was already an effort. Morton's sound, therefore, belongs not only to loud nights of performance, but also resonates in how modern metal understands weight, structure, and its own capacity to hold emotion. Somewhere between steel-heavy guitar tones and silences no one hears, the image that remains is not the stage or the lights, but a person still standing there, after all the collisions, still keeping his guitar voice from being warped by bitterness. Mark Morton leaves not only music, but a way of existing in a loud world without losing the human part inside. If you have ever heard a Lamb of God riff make your heart beat faster, or gone through a moment when music was the only thing keeping you upright, share that moment in the comments. Like, share the video and subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring the stories behind the sound, where the human being is truly seen.